presence here today and for the good, beautiful reception that we have been given by the mayor of this city and you who are attending this affair today. We salute the servants of God from Adam till today. We give the last prophet Muhammad the salutation of the salute, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the prayers and the peace be upon him. Ameen. I want to begin this address by saying all people are equal in origin, in their original nature, according to revelation given to prophets before Muhammad, and the same was given to Muhammad, the prophet of Arabia, about 14 centuries and so ago. All people come from one origin, one and the same origin. And we are deceived by the enemy of mankind, that is Satan. In our religion, Satan is called the enemy of mankind. Aduwan Nas, the enemy of all people. Satan. Shaitan, in the Quranic Arabic language, Shaitan. The Bible talks about inheritance. The Quran talks about inheritance. And if we understand it, our political idea for this great country, the United States of America, is also established upon a belief in inherent rights or inheritance. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it goes on to say that no government can take these rights away. They're rights that we are born with. So these are rights that the government didn't give us. These are rights that our Creator gave us. And by the way, as the Constitution didn't say Jesus Christ, it didn't say Allah. The first words, in fact, the first 5 lines or first 5 sentences, called ayat, to Muhammad the Prophet, came to him, and the word Allah is not in any of those 5 sentences. So Muhammad, the first communication he got from God, he didn't learn the name Allah, not from the communication anyway. God says to Muhammad, read. First word to Muhammad, read. First words of the Quran to Muhammad. Read, he said, in the name of your Lord who created. The one who created human being from a congealed blood. 2 lines, not Allah yet. Then he said again, read, and your Lord is most generous. And the one who taught man how to record, use the pen, the writing pen. He taught the human being, what the human being was not before knowing, what he never knew before. These are the 5 lines. First 5 lines communicated to Muhammad the Prophet from God. Why am I saying this, that Allah, the name Allah, was not mentioned in the first communication to Muhammad? Why am I saying this? The connection for our life is with creation. So the first name that was given to Muhammad of God is God the Creator. Since we call God by different names, I'm sure the wise writers and founding fathers of this great political idea that we have in America, I'm sure that they chose not to say Jesus Christ or not to say God. They didn't even say God. Because there will be many people coming to this democracy, living here. They foresaw that. In fact, that was the invitation from the very beginning. It began with people who were persecuted abroad, overseas, and they came here for a place to live their life of their choice, the life of their choice. So this was a country that was going to be a country of many. And the founding fathers, seeing ahead of time, seeing into the future, used no language that would disrespect any of us or that would exclude any of us. Creator, all of us can accept that equally, because we are equally the creation of God. Adam, in religion, both Quran, the Bible and the Quran, our holy book, the Quran, and in the holy book of the Christians, the Bible. In both these books, we have Adam as the name of the first human to exist on this earth. And we are told that this Adam was created by God. And he was made from the earth, from the ground. In fact, it says from the dust of the ground. From the dust of the ground, the dust of the earth, he was made. And it goes on to tell us how he became the father of all people, So we identify in our mortal body and in our original human spirit, we identify with Adam, the first father. Adam, the first father. Now, just reading the story, to me, it sounds like myth. Not like reality. It sounds like myth. Because how do you make a man from dust and make dust adhere together, make it hold together with water? Says, and rain came, and then he formed the man, and make it hold together with water, mud, and breathe into that mud, and it become a living soul. To me, that's more like myth than reality. And anybody believe that literally, you're not ready to help Detroit or the neighborhood I'm living in or any other place. Okay. You have a problem, and really these stories are for children, and the men know how to translate those stories. If you're a man, you're supposed to know how to translate the story. I don't mean man in the world, I mean man in knowledge. I'm not talking about a man in the world, because we know many men in the world, they can't read at all. No. But if you're a man in knowledge, you're supposed to know how to translate that and see it in reality. No, in its first picture that it presents is nothing but myth. It has to be understood. I once said on a radio program, and I was then rejected by my father. I was not inside of his organization called the Nation of Islam at that time. And I was trying to get back in. In fact, he had permitted me to come to his house and I could attend, but he was not permitting me to lecture, to give speeches. So they thought they would get me put me out again, the officers of the Nation of Islam. When they got the tape, they thought they had something to get me put out, so I would never come and speak again. So they gave it to my father. I didn't know he had it. So at the Sunday dinner, he invited me to come to the Sunday dinner, and I was sitting at the table there. He said, "Son, we want to play a tape." I didn't know what it was, but I've never been afraid of anything I do or say. I've never been afraid of anything I did or said, because I'm always trying to say the right thing. And when you know you're trying to do right, you're not afraid. So anyway, they played the tape. And then at one place in the tape, my father, he was sickly too. He stood up and applauded. And he said, "My son's got it." Now this is before you all knew that I was going to be a leader soon. Because he was sick at that time. Wasn't 2 years before I was your leader. Anyway, he said, "My son's got it." And he looked at my mother. My mother was sitting there. This is about, my mother sitting there. Can't recall it. Maybe 72. Maybe 1972, around there. Somewhere around there. Right about around there. And he looked at my mother. He said, "Isn't that right, Clara?" And my mother, that bright smile, she's very dark-skinned, and the teeth, when she smiled, her face looked like the sun. And she was smiling with that bright smile, and she said, "Yes." So this is what we've been waiting for.
Yes. So we said salam alaikum to all of us and to you out there. We'll come back to that.
What is the current conflict in Gaza? Tell us about the state of the Muslim world today.
Well, unfortunately, I would say that the current condition of the Palestinian people in general, and then the conflict in Gaza today, as you said, it really is telling us that the Muslim world is weak. But I think when we say weak, we have to look at why. I think the average Muslim in the world is a righteous believer. I think that you meet plenty of beautiful and good Muslims on any part of the earth, any part of this planet. The weakness with the Muslim world is really an indictment against the Muslim world leadership. It's the Muslim world leadership that I say, or that I think is really what's weak, or who's weak. And when I say leadership, first and foremost, what I have in my mind are the political leaders of the Muslim world. The political leaders are, I would say, the biggest hindrance to the progress of the Muslim world in general. And I think that the state of the Palestinian people is a reflection of the weakness of the governments. So what do I mean? When we go to nations, when we look at nations like Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, they have billions of dollars in oil money. But to be blunt about it, they are in the hands of the United States and Israel. They are not serving the interest of the Muslim world first and foremost. They are serving the interest, they are protecting the interest, or at least I would say they seem to be to kowtow to the interests of these Western nations, and primarily the United States and Israel, before they are devoting themselves to the concerns of the Muslim world at large. Now, to be fair, we have to give the custodians of the Kaaba, the Saudi government, who are the custodians of the Haramain, really, Haramain, the Kaaba in the Masjid al-Haram, and also the Prophet's Mosque in Medina. We give them credit. They do an excellent job in terms of their custodianship. When we were on Hajj, and many of us who've gone on Hajj and Umrah, we know that. But in terms of their role in protecting the interests of the Muslim world at large, I think they're failing. So what's an example of this? First and foremost, they have been blessed by Allah with a great amount of oil wealth. But what we see is that they are investing those dollars in times past in palaces and in opulence, etc. And now they're seeking to diversify their industries. So they want to make the Muslim world into or parts of the Muslim world, such as the Emirates. They want to make these destination spots for people to come visit and vacation. They're making a lot of changes, even in the country of Saudi Arabia, to bring in more Western influences. But what they're not doing, they're not taking those billions of dollars being made from the oil and really investing it in their own people. For example, when the Japanese lost World War II, it was only a couple of generations after World War II, because the Japanese had invested so much, they decided that we can't compete with the West in terms of physical force. We lost, but we're going to compete in terms of technology. So they began to invest in education. They invested in certain industries such as technology, and a lot of Japanese companies, outstripped American companies. So why can't the Muslims do the same thing? I'm saying even inside of places like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, etc. After that, there's so much resources available. Why can those dollars not be invested not only in Palestine, but other parts of the Islamic world as a whole? We know that illiteracy is highest in the Muslim world. We know that poverty is highest in parts of the Muslim world. We know that even the spread of certain diseases that have really been eradicated in everywhere else are still present in parts of the Muslim world. So something is happening in the leadership. Now, I've heard the discussion, for example, members of the Saudi government, they say that the reason why they don't want to give anymore to, for example, the Palestinians, namely the government, Hamas, is because those dollars aren't invested in those areas. So the leaders take the money, but they don't give it back to the people. But that's a leadership problem too. And I would say when we look at Iran, when we look at Egypt, when we look at, again, the Saudis, when we look at Morocco, we see governments divided. And Allah, He tells us very plainly in the Quran, وَاعْتَسِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold together by the rope of Allah and do not become divided. Don't become separated. Don't become sectarian or differing. The Ummah, the Muslims, are brotherhood, and that has been lost among the leaders. To the Western world's credit, you know, the Jews, they don't even accept Jesus Christ. The Christians see Jesus Christ as the Son of God and as God. The Jews don't accept Him as the Messiah. They don't accept Him as the Son of God. They definitely don't accept Him as God. But look how the Jews and the Christians in the Western world can get along. So that makes no sense to me that they can function politically, economically, and culturally as one unit, at least unified enough to be more powerful than the Muslim world. But the Muslims, we share the same theology. We share the same general beliefs of La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, etc. But our governments can't work together for the collective well-being of the Ummah. Obviously then, we have lost, or they have lost, the direction that the Ummah is to be on. The second reason I would say is still leadership, but it's not just the political leadership. It's also a problem with the religious leadership. Again, to be fair, we have excellent scholars. We have excellent men and women too, who are devoted to Islam, the knowledge of Islam, and advancing the knowledge of Islam, or at least transmitting the knowledge of Islam. But I would say that Islamic thought, Islamic thinking is stagnant. At best, the scholars are responding to trends in the world, like atheism, secularism, in times past, Marxism. They're responding to them. They're writing theological or intellectual responses in the fatwas that are issued. Is it lawful for Muslims to invest in Bitcoin, for example? So that's sort of the height of the intellectual output of the Muslim world. But that's a problem for us, because really the Muslims should be in the forefront of offering to the world, let alone the Muslims, but the whole world, a vision of where mankind should be and should be going. So we don't hear that coming from the majority of our Muslim teachers, our scholars who have been educated in places like Azhar, in other major institutions in the Muslim world. We are not hearing from them. We are not receiving from them a vision of how to move humanity forward. Again, I have a lot of critique for the United States and the Western world, but to their credit, when you read about climate change, when you read about the eradication of illiteracy, the eradication of poverty, when you read about the expansion of technologies that make life more merciful, the Western world is in the forefront of that. They have persons who are envisioning a future. And I think some of them are outright devilish. I'm not saying all of them are good people, but the fact of the matter is they have people thinking on these things. They're writing books projecting where the world is going to be 100, 200, 300 years from now. How the world can become more, how life on earth can become more sustainable. How life in man's society can be more accommodating for opportunity. When I read the Quran and when I look at the tradition of Muhammad the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we find every major issue taken up by the Western world today that the Western world considers to be points that represent its advance. All of those issues are highlighted and addressed in the Quran and in the tradition of the Prophet. However, when we hear what the Muslim world teachers and thinkers have to say, we're stopping and starting at fatwa in is our aqidah correct? And I think that's a problem. I would say lastly, as it pertains to education, but really in connection to that last point, when we read the Quran is not a book simply of do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do that. When I read the Quran, Allah is pointing to the whole universe that he created. And he actually uses the language to let us know that everything that he created is a text. It's the whole universe is a book to be engaged by the human intelligence, and it was created by God for the intellect of man to make use of for his service in community life or in society. So if I had the wherewithal, going back to that issue of where the dollars should be invested, we shouldn't just have Islamic studies departments in our universities. If we truly are reading the Quran and we're truly studying Islam, then the study of Islam naturally throws us or projects us or propels us into mathematics, astronomy, biology, chemistry, medicine, engineering, etc. So I think that we have come into a sort of stagnant, and I would almost say dead, sense of what religious life is. Religious life is the whole life. It's not just ritual. It's not just do's and don'ts, right and wrong. It is life, true religious life, as in the Quran and in the teachings of the Prophet. It is life that incorporates every aspect of man's development for progress. And I think that the teachers have lost that focus. And I believe that if we were to change these two, the Muslim world will be in much better condition as a whole. And if we were in much better condition as a whole, we wouldn't be so weak when it comes to supporting the Palestinian people, the people in the Sudan, the people in Myanmar and other parts, the Uyghurs. We can't do anything with those people but hate it in our heart and speak out against it. But you don't even hear a lot of Muslim leaders speaking out against it because we're not in the competition as we should be. So it's unfortunate. We want to keep our brothers and sisters across the world in our prayer. And I do believe that that's the significance of Islam rising in the West with us. We have to take up the mantle of progressing Muslim life in the full sense, in the hopes that it will reach the American public and in the hopes that it will reach the whole world for the better.
Inshallah. We want to go to Ramadan, which we are in, and then explain what it is and why it is that we have done what we have done this moment, inshallah. Bear with us. Make notes. Call a friend. Tell a friend. Subscribe. Comments are welcome. respectful comments, obviously, and support us. Now listen and listen keenly, please.
I pray that your first week of Ramadan has gone well and that you found that the doors of mercy has opened in these days of mercy and that you're gearing up and getting ready for the second third of Ramadan, the days of forgiveness. Our discussion today is about the journey of the self in Ramadan. And the goal for today's discussion is to understand the potential transformation a human can go in this blessed month. And we'll talk about it from the psychological, spiritual, and behavioral perspectives, the various transformations that can happen. But before we get there, first I wanted to share a story, one of my own favorite about the month of Ramadan. It's a story that's narrated about Sayyidina Musa, alayhi salam, Moses, peace be upon him, that Musa was given a gift or a miracle of Allah speaking to him. And so he says to Allah Azza wa Jal, I was given the miracle of you speaking to me directly. Have you given a similar gift to anyone else? And Allah Jalla wa Ala revealed to Musa that there will be a group of his servants that will come at the end of time who are given the month of Ramadan to fast. And they will fast until their lips turn white and their skin becomes a yellowish hue. And that the reward for their sacrifice of fasting will be that the veil between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is lifted when they break their fast. And that He will answer their prayers or du'as at this time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O Musa, Tuba. Tuba is a part of Jannah or a place in Jannah, in paradise, will be for those whose livers are thirsty and stomachs are hungry in Ramadan. A beautiful story, reminding us how much, how incredible and amazing Ramadan is and the marvels of Ramadan and how much you can transform in this month. That the miracle that was given to Musa, Allah compares it to the miracle He gives not just the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but all of Ummat Muhammad, all of us. MashaAllah. Ramadan in its essence is the month of the heart. I would often hear my teachers say about this month that it's the month of little food and little drink and little sleep. It's the month of ridding yourself of everything that's unnecessary, everything that's extra. I'd often hear them use the terms laghu and lahu, that it's the time and month to get rid of all the laghu and lahu. And lahu typically is translated as unnecessary speech. Right? And laghu is typically this frivolous, idle, kind of wasteful time spent, basically. And the idea here is to get rid of both laghu and lahu in Ramadan. And they usually have negative connotations, right? And so in Ramadan, we're definitely talking about getting rid of anything and everything that's negative. But we're also talking about getting rid of the unnecessary extras. The things that aren't necessarily haram or problematic, but rather they take up time and they're wasteful in time. They're not needed. So here we need to take a step back and each of us kind of think to ourselves, what do I do that's extra, that's not needed in my day? Now, since all of us are fasting, we're already giving up some extras, right? We've given up an extra meal by the mere fact of fasting. If you get up for suhoor and you eat iftar, that's 2 meals. You've given up at least 1 meal in the day, and certainly snacks as well, right? And if you're getting up for if you're praying tarawih and getting up for suhoor, then you also have given up extra sleep in your day. So you've already done this, right? Extra sleep and extra food you didn't necessarily need, and Allah's teaching us this, right? But what else can you give up that's extra that you don't actually need? What do you find yourself gravitating to in your free time? Now, for many of us, if it's not people that's distracting us, it's probably our phones, tablets, laptops, social media, the myriad of apps and games, Netflix binging, right? All kinds of things that distract us and take our time. Abu Hurairah reports that the Prophet ﷺ said that a person might fast and get nothing from his fast except for hunger. And he might get up at night to pray and get nothing from that getting up at night except for sleeplessness. You see, the point of Ramadan isn't just leaving food and drink, right? The ayah, which we'll talk about a little later, that talks about the commands fasting, it ends with لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may attain God consciousness. Meaning that fasting is a platform of how you attain taqwa, or God consciousness. And Imam al-Ghazali classified fasts into 3 different types, 3 different levels. The first of which is the level of the lay people, the general masses, who fast from leaving food and drink. And they have a routine, if you will. The routine of, getting up for suhoor, leaving food and drink all day long, eating iftar, and then going to pray tarawih. Some people don't even get to the point of praying tarawih, right? But this routine, this cycle in and cycle out, now it will definitely garner blessings. There is no doubt about that. But the question is, will you really be transformed just by the cycle of these routine activities, right? The fast, don't get me wrong, the fast will inherently benefit you, right? It will raise you in taqwa, just like prayer will inherently benefit you. Even if you don't have a lot of thought and heart in it, it will still benefit you. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about prayer, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ, right? That prayer will prevent you from evils. And there's the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when somebody came to him and said, this person is sinning, but he prays. And the Prophet's response was, his prayer will prevent him, right? So keep on with that prayer. It'll eventually lead you to taqwa, God consciousness. Same with fasting. And while this first level of fasting, this primary level, is quite beneficial, it doesn't necessarily transform you completely. Why? Because what you're fasting from are things that otherwise are permitted, food and drink. But it doesn't mean that you're actually fasting from things that are prohibited. That's the second level of the fast, right? That Imam al-Ghazali says that's the fast of the khawas, the elect, right? That they leave behind not just the permitted, the food and drink, but also the haram. They are the ones who fast from making sure their eyes don't see haram, and their ears don't listen to haram, and their tongues don't engage in haram, and their limbs don't take them to haram. And they don't overeat or overindulge. This is the second level of the fast. The third level, and the highest level to attain, is the khawas of the khawas, the elect of the elect. And this third level involves being physically and spiritually and intellectually occupied with your Lord without breaking consciousness from that state even for a moment. MashaAllah. This is the fast of the heart and the mind. And it's a very interesting idea, this idea of the fast of the elite, right? This is the fast of of leaving behind the laghu and the lahu, all the extra unnecessary. So on one level, you left behind the permissible, the food and the drink. And on the next level, you left behind the impermissible, all the haram. But on the third level, you left behind what is otherwise fine, the mubah, otherwise okay to do. But you're purposefully minimizing it or limiting it so that you can spend more time focusing on your spiritual transformation and focusing on your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. MashaAllah. Think about it like this. That extra time, when somebody asked you, how are you doing? And you spent 20 minutes chit-chatting with them. Now, outside of Ramadan, that's fine, right? You're kind of getting to know people and you're keeping up the connection with people and your family and so on. But inside of Ramadan, what you needed was only 5 minutes. The extra 15 that you spent is considered level. It's extra. It's too much, right? It was unnecessary, right? Chit-chat and talk and so on. And also because chit-chat could then bring with it haram too, right? So you want to really curb that and be careful. So in those 15 minutes, what could you have done with them? You could have done more ibadah, more dhikr. Or think about when you first wake up in the morning and people, like, the first thing they do is look at their phone, right? And they look at their, their Facebook wall or their Twitter feed or their WhatsApp messages, right? And they take 20 minutes to do that, when all they really needed was 5 minutes to just see if everything was okay, right, with friends and family, right? But all the extra stuff that they didn't need, that could have been spent in clicking your Quran app instead and spending those 15 minutes reading a couple more pages of Quran that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten in your day. You see, in Ramadan, you take yourself to account for every minute and every moment and every second, right? That is what defines the elect of the elect. The khawas al-khawas, right? Those who are very careful in how they spend every moment of Ramadan. These are the people who understand the true essence of Ramadan. They understand it to be a spiritual and intensive spiritual retreat that's only 30 days long. It's a cocoon that we, as lowly caterpillars, crawl into, right? And we go into this cocoon for 30 days, hoping that when we come out, we'll have wings strong enough to soar with the rest of the year. MashaAllah. And you see, it's easy to get into this cocoon, right? It's easy to enter into this prestigious prep school called the Ramadan cocoon. MashaAllah, right? That's easy. Because all it requires for entrance or admission is you being Muslim. But just because you enter doesn't mean you're going to be successful. And doesn't mean you're going to graduate successfully from this prestigious school of Ramadan, right? The tricky part is actually trying to figure out how to make your wings strong enough that when you come out of that cocoon that you're able to maintain the rest of the 11 months of the year until the next Ramadan, right? MashaAllah. And this is where I hear my teachers speak about Ramadan being different for different people. They would say that for some, Ramadan comes as a mercy to wash them through and through. And for others, Ramadan came to scrub out the filth and the grime and the soot that had developed and kind of caked on in our hearts all year long, right? And yet others, their Ramadan comes like a sieve, asking you essentially to figure out whether you're going to choose Allah or choose the dunya. Right? Choose your akhirah, your hereafter, or choose the dunya. And it could be that the Ramadan for each of us is a combination of these things, or whichever one it is, and I pray that we decipher which one it is. But if you're starting to feel like, which Ramadan is it for me this year? And you're starting to feel a little panicky and worried, like a whole week has gone by and I still haven't figured it out. Now what? Right? Well, now the panic starts to build up a little bit. Well, let's take a step back. Because anytime the human being needs to figure out something, the manual that they go to is the Quran, right? So let's look at the Quran, and let's look what it says about fasting. We'll go to Surah Baqarah, Ayah 183, which begins the discussion on the commandment to fast, right? يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم, right? لعلكم تتقون. There goes the لعلكم تتقون part again, right? But it's telling us, oh, you who believe fasting is prescribed unto you like it was prescribed to the people before you, so that you may attain God consciousness, right? That's the first ayah. Next ayah begins with أياما معدودات, right? They are limited, fixed number of days. Hence the concept of the spiritual intensive, right? The spiritual retreat that we're about to enter into. It's very limited time. So make most use of it. And then the next ayah comes down and says, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. And it begins right that way, where it references that the Quran, that Ramadan is the month of the Quran in which it was revealed as a guide to mankind. Now between that ayah and between the ayah that comes 2 ayahs down, which give you all the rules of fasting, there's an ayah in the middle, right? The ayah in the middle. And most people don't think about this ayah or even connect it to Ramadan. But when you look at the order of the ayat, you realize Allah put it there. There is nothing haphazard in the Quran. It is there and in that place very specifically. So you have all these verses referring to to fasting and siyam, right? And then you get this ayah that talks about وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, right? أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and if they ask you, here he's talking to Sayyidina Muhammad, if they ask you, O Muhammad, concerning me, indeed I am near, and I respond to the invocation of the supplicant when he calls upon me. Beautiful. One of my favorite. That Allah says to us that He is near. Call upon Him, He will answer. And the earlier story that we shared, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds or tells Sayyidina Musa of us, Ummat Muhammad, coming at the end of time, that we will have our prayers answered, and especially at the time of breaking fast, and especially in this month of Ramadan. And then it carries on with further verses referring to the rules of how you fast. But look at that ayah that's sandwiched in between right there. And remember that that is part and parcel of fasting, is calling on to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking Him, because this journey of the self in Ramadan, this journey we're going to take, it can't possibly be just because of putting away food and drink. It can't possibly be just from leaving the haram, which we should have left anyway, right? The transformation that happens is that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the focus on Him, Jalla Jalaluhu. And reminding us that the Quran was sent as that catalog, as that manual for human beings. Allah knows what He created, right? And that you have to know that when you call upon Allah, He answers you. And if it's khair for you, if it's good for you, and if it's not good for you, then He replaces it with what's better for you, because as humans, we don't necessarily know what's best for us, although sometimes we think we do, right? But Allah will fix and put in what's better than what we asked for, if what we asked for wasn't so good. So we should go into the month of fasting with confidence, knowing that Allah knows what He created, knowing that He knows that this was best for us. People might say, really? Fasting without food and drink for an entire month? Yes, an entire month of the year. That's 1/12 of your year. That's 1/12 of the year is roughly about 8%. That's 8% of your days alive, you're fasting. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if there was a detriment in that, He would never have commanded it. But He knows that there is a benefit in it, and that benefit isn't just physically. There's a physical benefit and a spiritual benefit and a behavioral benefit and a psychological benefit to this commandment. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He would never ask us to do something that was detrimental to us. And so here we should really focus on this fasting with confidence and know that it is the best for us. But we should also do, one of the most beautiful lessons we learn in Islam is that the human being should always be between two very important emotions: hope and fear. Hope and fear, raja and khawf. We should always, and in terms of fasting, we should look at our fast with hope that it's been accepted and we've done the best we can do. And a little bit of fear and trepidation that maybe I didn't do as well as I should have with this day of fasting, and that tomorrow I will do better. I will do better. I will do better. It's beautiful. It's like the wings of a bird, hope and fear. That if you lose one, the bird cannot sustain its flight. It crashes and falls, right? Always to be between the two emotions. And here we ask ourselves and say to ourselves, this all sounds great. Dr. Rania, this all sounds great. But how? How do we do this? How do we take this journey of the self in Ramadan? How is it that we reach a point that we're really reaping the full blessings of this month as it's intended to be? Let's look at Imam al-Ghazali and his psychology of the self. Right? We're trying to understand our journey of the self. Let's look at Imam al-Ghazali and the psychology of the self. And Imam al-Ghazali's understanding of the human psyche supersedes the best of what modern psychology has come up with, and explaining of the human condition. And I say that as a psychiatrist, that I truly am, just amazed by what Imam al-Ghazali has come with as the framework of the human psyche. And incidentally, Imam Ghazali's framework of the human psyche is the same framework we use at the Khalil Center, which is a Muslim counseling center. And for those who are not familiar with it, it's a professional counseling center where we integrate Islamic psychotherapeutic care with professional counseling. And this framework of how you offer counseling and care to Muslims, right, is one of the most important things I think we've been working on at the Muslim Mental Health and Wellbeing program that I direct at Stanford University and work very closely with Khalil Center to come up with. Because I think it's incredibly important, and Imam Ghazali and our noble predecessors and scholars like him have come up with this wonderful framework of how to understand the human psyche and how transformation can happen, which is really the essence of what counseling is for, right? And so when you look at the true genius of Imam al-Ghazali, you see here that when he talks about the psyche, he splits it into 4 domains. The intellect, aql. The heart, qalb. The nafs, the self. And the ruh, the spirit or soul. And the spiritual heart, not the physical heart, the one that, right, pumps blood, but rather the spiritual heart, the qalb, is what drives and nourishes our soul. It's what seeks connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is what has the potential to have the most beautiful experiences and purest of emotions. But you see, when you don't feed your heart, right, just like if the physical heart was devoid of blood, it would go into cardiac arrest and die. The spiritual heart, when it's not being fed properly, right, there's a huge void. And whenever there's a void, you see these 4 aspects, right? Something else will come up and try to fill the void instead. So the first contender that comes up to the plate, kind of waddles on up, very naively, is the physical state. And it comes to the front line thinking it can fill the void that you haven't been feeding your spiritual heart with. It's going to fill the void. With what? The physical, right, stuff. Clothes and cars and gadgets and entertainment and relationships and people, both actual and virtual, right? You fill it with stuff, right? But unfortunately, the more you put in it, it's like a bottomless cup. The more you try to fill it, the more that seeps out. The more you put in, the more that comes out. And you can't actually fill the void truthfully. So you feel the void still. The next contender comes up, and this is the nafs, the ego, right? So it says, okay, the physical can't fill it, I'm going to try. And it wells up, right? The ego wells up, the nafs, all your desires, right? And when the physical wells up and the ego wells up, it pushes the spiritual heart out of the way. It weakens that connection to the heart. The connection that you could potentially feel with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it weakens it. And so Ramadan comes, and actually it is the only time of the year that it forces you to put the physical aside and break the nafs and put that aside. The ego goes down and the physical goes down. And like we said, whenever there's a void, something else has to well up and take its place. But when you put down and minimize the physical and you minimize the ego, the nafs, the heart, right, takes its place. It takes its rightful place, right, in its connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like the phenomenon that we hear about when we learn that when somebody loses a sense, the other senses get stronger. Like we know this about people who are blind, that their hearing is much stronger than the typical person. And when the person is deaf, their vision is stronger than the others, right? This idea of one will take over the other. So subhanAllah, look at how Ramadan comes, pushing the physical out of the way, physical needs, right? The stuff that we try to fill the void with, and pushes aside the ego, right? And the nafs and the whims and desires, and pushes the two, and you can't turn to food, and you can't turn to things that are, ego-laden desires for instant gratification. So instead what happens, you actually are able to rekindle that spark that was in your heart, right? To rekindle that spark and actually ignite it back into that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why the awliya, those who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, have written about and spoken extensively about how their connection with Allah almost unanimously, started in the month of Ramadan. The awliya sometimes are also scholars, but sometimes they're not. The awliya are folks like yourself and myself who have worked and worked and worked hard and then reached a high level in connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they have said that that happened for them in the month of Ramadan. And if not in the month of Ramadan, then when? Right? When the heart can really feel that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then you realize that Ramadan comes to realign our system, to realign, take this journey of the self and realign everything the way it's supposed to and put the heart back in its rightful place as the leader, mashallah. This is the fast of the khawas al-khawas, right? The elect of the elect. The fast of the heart, mashallah. So then again, you might say, Dr. Rania, this sounds great. How do I do this practically? What are the practical tips of doing this? This is the theoretical. What's the practical? How do I actually get there? Well, and you might say to yourself, I know that I'm in the days of mercy, right? A week of it has passed, a few more days of it left. How do I capture that mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I know that the next third is going to be the days of forgiveness. How do I attain that forgiveness and make sure I'm forgiven for everything small and big, known and forgotten that I've done? And the last third is coming up that has in it most likely Laylatul Qadr. How do I attain that? And how do I become those from Utaqa in Nar, those who are taken out of the hellfire should they have been written to be in it, right? And here, what I offer myself and you, inshallah, is the formula of my spiritual teachers. Beautiful formula, where they said in Ramadan, you take everything possible and you categorize it into 3 categories. Everything. You have to figure out everything you do and say, every action you take in Ramadan, you have to figure out if it fits, it has to fit into one of these 3 categories. The first being that it can be dealt with after Ramadan. Postpone it till after Ramadan. The second, total nonsense. And the third, it needs immediate attention, right? So you postpone the first till after Ramadan, you throw away the second, and you take care of the third now, because we do not have more time to waste. A week of Ramadan has passed, right? So here in our kind of discussion, let's talk a little bit about how to practically make sure that we are the khawas of the khawas, right? That the journey of ourself is really going to go to where it's supposed to be, the fasting of the heart. So let me share with you a little bit about, the group of people I typically work with, women and girls. And often, I hear a lot of guilt about not doing enough. And I hear a lot of anger about, how come as women we have it the most difficult to try to balance everything. Being mothers and wives and daughters and daughter-in-laws and balancing careers if we have them and so on. That there's so much expectation that we are the ones who do all the caretaking. Right? Making sure that everybody else is fed, and everybody else has gotten up for suhood, and everybody else has gone to the masjid to pray, and everybody has done everything else. And nobody turns around and asks whether we as women, right, we've taken care of our own ibadah, and has there been time for it? And by the way, this story, although I'm talking about women right now, really extends to anybody and everybody that has a lot on their plate. Particularly caretakers, whether they be of elderly parents or in-laws, whether they be of young children, whether they be of taking care of things in your life or career, whether you be a student and you're trying to balance out your primary responsibility of studying, for example, right? So anybody that's got a lot on their plate, right? So I hear a lot of anger and frustration, a lot of guilt, right? And for women especially, I'll hear, that we slaved away at the kitchen all day long, and the men were the ones to get off for tarawih. They came to eat and they went to pray and they got their fast and they got their tarawih. We got nothing except slaving away in the kitchen. Subhanallah. And I would imagine that this sounds familiar to many. And here I would say, this feeling of helplessness, this fatigue, this kind of feeling of a failed Ramadan journey is very common. But again, I offer you my teacher's formula. That we need to figure out what needs immediate attention. Because I really do think this formula works. And what needs to be postponed until after Ramadan. Right? And what's nonsense? And let me explain to you what I mean by nonsense, right? Take, for example, the succumbing of familial and cultural expectations that really make no sense. Like what? One of my pet peeves in Ramadan are these massive iftars, right? When you feel that you have to have all these people over to your house to feed them. Now, granted, feeding people is a blessing and is important. But the hadith, if you look at it, says that you break the person's fast, which is like a date, a cup of milk, mashallah. These massive iftars, and especially here I'll talk about women for a minute, is really problematic. Because think about what happens. It took you several days to buy the groceries and to figure out the meals you wanted to make and to prep it and to clean the house and to get it ready and so on. Then the day of fasting, and the day, well, you're fasting, yes, but the day of the iftar, the guests are coming over, you cooked and cleaned and cooked and cleaned and cooked and cleaned to the extent that I've heard sisters say they've literally forgotten to pray their fard prayers, trying to do these iftars, right? When they have like tons of people coming over. It's like, subhanAllah, you have let go of what has been commanded, the fard prayers, and you're busying yourself with what is sunnah, breaking people's fast, which makes no sense. It's total nonsense. Do you see what I'm saying? And even if you do, and then let's say the people come over and you cook and clean and cook and clean, and then afterwards, right, they leave, and what are you left with? A big mess to clean, right? Which takes another day. And if you do this, just this one iftar lasted you, took over, 4 or 5 days of your ibadah. And if you do this just a couple of times in Ramadan, that's literally half of your month gone. And if you do this more than that, that's your whole month gone, right? SubhanAllah. So what do you do? And people say, but I have to invite people over. They invited me, I have to invite them, or I have to go, or I have expectations, or my in-laws, or my, mashallah. So I offer you again what my teachers have offered me. Do the bare minimum necessary. You have to go see your in-laws, then you must do that. You have to invite them over, then do that, right? But your friends and the other people who are not going to have this intense animosity or difficulty with, you say to them after Ramadan. Or, it's too late now, but you would have maybe thrown a big party before Ramadan and said, I'm inviting all my friends and buddies so that nobody blames me for not having, been invited or inviting them. True? And if you couldn't do that, then maybe you say, look, I'm postponing everything because I really want to focus on my Ramadan, and I'm postponing everything and I'm going to have a big shebang in Eid, which is exactly what the point of Eid is for. You see, Eid comes after this arduous month of fasting as a celebration. For you to eat and drink and hop and skip and run and play, do all kinds of things, right? That's the point of Eid. It is the same thing as the big Eid, Eid al-Adha, right? At the time of Hajj. After that arduous journey of Hajj and you're disheveled and tired and fatigued, then comes Eid, right? It's the same concept of Ramadan. But we forget. And in fact, sometimes we even let Eid pass by without really putting the emphasis that we should on it. And yet we try to do all of this in Ramadan. I mean, literally recipes that don't come out except for Ramadan. I find this to be the most nonsensical thing ever, right? People pulling out grandma's old recipes from I don't know what, mashallah, and frying and stuffing and doing and mashallah. This truly is a problem. Truly, this is a problem, right? And here I would say, really try to figure out and minimize and figure out the bare minimum of what you need to do and the bare minimum expectations you need to fulfill, and everything else postpone. Or if it's truly nonsensical, throw it out completely, right? And if you do have to go to places that are distracting, right, or will take away from your time, don't go spiteful. Instead, go and understand that this is your duty, so you have to go, but do your duty and leave, right? Say, I have to pray Taraweeh and leave, right? Or I have to get up early for suhoor, and so you leave, right? And last year, people get really stressed out. And so last year we did a talk on stress reduction and al-Balkhi's techniques of how you deal with stress. Because what happens if you find yourself in a place where you are not happy and not comfortable and you really want to do this Ramadan thing that you just heard about, mashallah, but you have to go because it's keeping family ties, it's keeping people happy, I would recommend that you review that lecture, inshallah, because that too is your jihad. It is. It's a difficult thing. And so you see, sometimes we make this journey of the self in Ramadan more difficult on ourselves than it needs to be. Right? Figure out what you can postpone. Really, think about it. Was there an article someone sent you, a YouTube clip that you wanted to watch, a show, your favorite show? All of it can wait. None of it's necessary. All of it can be postponed after Ramadan. This is assuming these are things that are halal and okay, right? But they can all be postponed. If they're haram, they have to be gone, mashallah, right? And then figure out what needs immediate attention and make that your priority. And figure out how to be creative instead of being spiteful, right? There are duties we have to take care of. You have to eat and drink, you have to do laundry, you have to clean the house around you, right? Chores. Well, unplug from the music and the other stuff and plug in Quran instead. People are like, I didn't have enough time to read, I want to read, or I'm slow at reading, or so on, and I have to cook and clean and laundry and so on. Well, plug in the Quran. And do you know that if you put the Qari on and you listen to him and you just recite after him, that counts as recitation. That counts towards the Quran you're supposed to read or you want to read in Ramadan. But we forget because we're on autopilot. So we start doing folding our laundry or cooking without realizing that we should also be doing dhikr during it, or that we should be reciting after the Qari. And that counts towards your Quran that you're hoping to do that month. SubhanAllah. Or if you're feeling like all I do is chauffeur the kids around and they have camps and classes and so on, and again, turn on the Quran, recite after him, make use of your time, double what you need to do plus what is extra to do. Be creative in how you do that, mashallah. Or you feel like you're spending so much time cooking day in and day out because your family has to eat, right? You and your family have to eat, mashallah. Do a Ramadan meal swap. I think it's a beautiful idea where, you get a group of people and each one help cook. And so, you might cook in the entire month of Ramadan like 4 or 5 times because your sisters or your family members or so on, they helped you, they cooked the other days, right? Things like this, right? Or get a group of people, preferably you would have done this before Ramadan, but you can get a group of people together and cook some things that are freezable and put them so they're easy suhoor and easy iftar items. Be creative. The point is be creative in how you do this so that you can spend more time in Quran and more time in ibadah and more time in the service of others. And then remember that Ramadan is also a month of charity. And charity isn't just monetary. Some people have the money and they need to give that. But others don't have that, and that's not the charity that's expected of them. Their charity is the charity of time, or the charity of energy, right? The charity of volunteering, of giving your knowledge, or giving your time, or giving your energy. At Stanford, I'm always working with students, and they'll say, I'm a poor, broke student, I don't have anything to give. Give your time, give your knowledge. Right? You have some time off and there's some Muslim kids that have a camp, go work with them. Right? Share your knowledge, right? Share that energy. Your masjid, your local masjid needs something and needs people to help direct the lines of traffic and so on. Give your time and energy. That's charity too. SubhanAllah. And every day needs to have charity, and no day of Ramadan should be devoid of that. MashaAllah. And here we'll kind of wrap up with the example that we started off with. This example of Ramadan being the spiritual cocoon. The spiritual cocoon that you crawl into as a caterpillar, right? This little tiny caterpillar. And that most people would say that the caterpillar is something they don't really like too much, right? Compared to a butterfly. The butterfly is beautiful and has these amazing patterns on its wings. And people kind of, they like the butterfly, but they're not too excited about the caterpillar, the creepy crawly, and it kind of gets in the way and it eats things, and right? SubhanAllah, that it's not as beautiful and maybe even unsightly or unpleasant to some people, and they don't even want to see it or touch it. But we forget where butterflies come from. They come from these caterpillars that took an arduous journey to transform from the caterpillar into the butterfly. And then we forget that it took them going into their cocoon to transform and come out as a butterfly, right? And like us too, that the last 11 months, the grime and dirt and soot that had built over our hearts, right, has come in the way of our heart really being able to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for us to emerge on the other end of Ramadan as a new person, completely transformed, it will require us going into this cocoon. And like the caterpillar that's really concerned mostly with very earthly needs, right? Eating, essentially, finding food and drink. And it can't go very far. Very different from the butterfly that can fly and soar and figure out where it wants to go and figure out where it's going to have put its next generation, right? And like this butterfly that's going to have these strong wings that can carry it far off places. And that it's able to have loftier aspirations than the caterpillar, then we too need to be like that butterfly, right? That will coming in this caterpillar, that when it went to the fruit, it left holes in it and made the fruit rot. And when it went to a leaf, it put all kinds of holes in it and left it with holes, right? And when it went to wood, it caused it to weaken and rotten. Very much unlike the butterfly that goes to a plant and brings out fruit from pollination, right? And it goes to a leaf and makes it look more beautiful. Us too, likewise. We need to do the same. We need to do the same as butterflies. And to really want to transform fully, we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transform us from lowly caterpillars into butterflies, right? That allows us to really use these 30 days that were meant to be the spiritual intensive to emerge on the other end very strong, with wings that can help us navigate the next 11 months safely and soundly. That this journey of the self be truly transformative, and that our fast be the fast of the elect, the khawas al-khawas. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our fasting and our prayer and our charity and our standing at night, and that He makes this month the way it was meant to be, a month of little food and little sleep, a month that we rid ourselves of unnecessary laghu and lahu. Sisters and brothers, remember that it's not just quantity, it is also quality. You're not just meant to reduce the quantity of what you eat and drink and consume, but you're also meant to look at the quality of that too. So no more festive extras, right? Take away the extras. Put yourself in the shoes of those who truly don't have what you have. This is the definition of empathy. And the only way to literally put in, as opposed to sympathy, right? To have empathy is putting yourself in the shoes of somebody who doesn't have what you have. And for you to do that, you must actually work. It's not just a feeling, it's an actual working towards, which is what we do in Ramadan. So you minimize the food, you minimize the drink, you minimize the lahu, and you minimize the laghu, right? You minimize all of these things, and we hope that after 30 days of doing this, that we actually have built healthy habits that become imprinted on who we are, and it lasts for a long time, inshallah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people in Ramadan who learn to not be petty and trivial, who learn to be humble yet confident, who learn to become magnanimous souls, right? Who learn to have their insides match their outsides, and have the inside and the outside both be beautiful. Ameen. I ask you, sisters and brothers, to keep me and my family in your du'as, to keep each other in your du'as, to keep Zaytuna College, its students, its faculty, and its staff in your du'as. I ask you to remember Zaytuna College and support its efforts, and to check out the new website. And I ask you, inshallah, to please keep us in your most precious du'as this month. May we all have a transformative month. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. And now, inshallah, we'll take a few.
Assalamu alaikum. Yes. Ramadan feasibility. Let's recap. The first, I played myth to remove the thought of mythology in our communities and among ourselves, pertaining to Al-Islam, but pertaining to areas like this one, the month of fasting, and other people's injection into that. They have their own thoughts, which is natural. But to remove that myth, or any myths, not that there is one, but some people do have those myths surrounding what we do, times what we say as Muslims. So that was why I started with the Imam speaking and highlighting the understanding of myths and how these things can cause a lot of problems, because sometimes the persons who are speaking, they speak with such clarity and it has a sense of that is real, you know, and because they've got a particular bias or ill feeling towards Muslims, or they have encountered some relationship that did not work out the right way, whether it's a male or female relationship. It's a number of reasons, you know. But we say what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. We don't say what we want to say. We explain, but we cannot say what we want to say because it's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. So the Quran, Al-Baqarah, says, O ye who believe, fasting is prescribed to you as it was prescribed to those before you, that you may learn self-restraint. Fasting. Self-restraint. Right? Then it says fasting for a fixed number of days. So we don't have a situation where someone comes now and says, listen, we're going to fast, you know, like some of these individuals who run cults or organizations or groups. And then they say, listen, we need to fast 40 days or 60 days or so, whatever. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is not us, and this wasn't the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, saying. You understand? This is Kitabullah, this is the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says again, fasting for a fixed number of days. But if any of you is ill or on a journey, the prescribed number should be made up from days later. For those who can do it with hardship is a ransom. The feeding, who cannot do it, right? There's a ransom. The feeding of one and the giving. The feeding of one, the indigent, but he that will give more, hold on a second, who will give more of his own free will, it will be better for him and be better for you that ye fast if ye only but knew. So we don't have a situation where someone turns up and says, listen here what, I'm sick, I can't fast. Yeah, they can say that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when you're free from from our ailments, the prescribed number of days that one misses should be made up. Now, as Muslims, our imams and our Sharia shows explains to us that those of us who can immediately make up those times and are willing to do so should. But before Ramadan returns, right, those days, those number of days that was missed through ailment, hardship and so forth, should be made up. Now, what's important to understand here is that we do not control time. We don't control time. So the majority of peoples, once they're not suffering hardship through the ailments and so forth, they would make haste after the Eid and make up those numbers. Reason again, we don't control time. So let us say, for instance, that a person missed so many days, okay, prescriptions, ill health, medical requirements. And then they say, okay, listen, I have I have the rest of the year. Now, how do anyone knows that from that day they said that they wouldn't die the next day? Or they wouldn't, the hardship and the ailment would not return more severe. So it's to be rational, to be logical, and to be practical, and to be feasible. So one tend to, the first moment we get is to make up those number of days. And especially sisters. Sisters do this automatic. Because if the sisters is on her moon cycles, then they're not able to fast. And soon as they are free from such, they return to fasting. And they make up the days, the number of days that they were not able to fast because of their moon cycles. So that which is regulated under sisters, and we're not talking about ill health here, how then should a man feels that he can leave it for whenever? So you understand the kind of, what they call it, the social, the ethical, the moral democracy, what they perceive to be a democracy of Islam really is. It's every day, it's every second. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ramadan is the month in which was sent down, or Ramadan is the month which was sent down the Quran as a guide to mankind. Also clear signs and guidance for judgment between right and wrong. So there is so much to Ramadan, and not just one restraining ourselves from eating and pleasures and running around and so forth. It makes us reflect, immediate reflection. So all of us as human beings on this earth, our reflection will be somewhat the same and somewhat different because of our experiences. But one thing is for sure, that we will be all moving. We are just how we do whatever we do on a day-by-day basis and conduct ourselves in a manner that is much better in many cases than it was previous months. So there is such a profound experience and understanding and realization towards this month called Ramadan. And that's beside the fact that the Quran was sent down from Allah in this month. But how is it that the man's mind, his body, his action, reaction, his morality, and everything is not taken into account? It's the training, it's consistent training, it's the regularity of how we perceive, how we develop our faculties, how we sharpen, how we clean our faculties, our emotion. Ramadan is something very, very, very extraordinarily serious if one but look at it properly. Ramadan. What people tend to do is what we're prohibited from doing in approaching our wives and so forth in daylight hours and this kind of thing. They're saying like, wow, how can we have somebody telling us what to do? And to regulate our dutifulness, because now we have to be timekeepers. And not now, we are timekeepers, but we have to adjust ourselves to timekeeping more so now than ever before. So if we weren't trained and we didn't conduct ourselves in timekeeping, as Islam is a faith based on timing, based on so many things, but one of the main things and signs that one sees is timing, because the time for prayer, in preparing oneself for prayer, you have to create time. You have to cleanse oneself and then approach the prayer. So it's time. Everything is based on time. I mean, our whole life, outside of saying the word Muslims, we all human beings, our life is based on time. If we were understood and understand and comprehend. And we're not talking about no clock. So there is things that are permitted and there's things that are not permitted. And it is asking us really to be dutiful to ourselves and to be mindful to ourselves and be tolerant to others at the same time. Time again, you know. And reflect on the fact that there's other people, human beings in this earth, that are less fortunate, less privileged than ourselves in relation to what they have available to themselves, in relation to things like what is happening right now in Palestine. People who are starving. They are starving, but they were inflicted an erroneous intolerance from others. So even when there was no fasting, they were starving. They were thirsty. Now, mentioning thirst, could you imagine how important it is to understand what is the benefit of water? And we're talking and speaking on fasting. It's not that fasting we deny our wives and we deny eating. We deny everything. Everything. There's no, okay, we will not eat, but we will not drink fruits, but we drink water. And we will have fruits, yes, fruits. I mean, you know, fruits as in fruit juice before I was really speaking about, trying to explain. It's not that. We're prohibited from all. If we but knew and understand, right? So we would recognize other people and the deficiencies that they're suffering from and how effective our lives are, and then make adjustments to help the poor, needy, and the destitute, and inquire about our neighbors, people in our immediate surroundings. You know, are they finding life difficult? What have we done? Whether we suggest something or whether we gave them an opportunity to aid them or create an opportunity to aid them from their displeasures and their hardships. Ramadan is a very serious thing. Very, very serious thing. And it also reconnects us or encourage connection, because we break our fast with our families, but we also break our fast with our neighbors and our friends and our brothers and sisters in Islam. But we also are told to give to the poor and needed in our communities. Ramadan is a very, very, very serious thing. Very serious thing. Now, is there an overseer? Is there persons or peoples, right, that's there saying, you ain't restraining yourself, we ain't doing this, you should give more, right? And, you know, we know that you got this big car and you got this. No, nothing like this. It is Allah's instructions. It is the guidance from the Prophet to see how to expand to us how to fulfill those instructions from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's it. It's very clear. It's very clear. There's no person coming around saying, listen here, right? You got a big job. You own your own house, right? You should not turn up and give us X, and Z, and Y. No. None of these things. None of these things, right? So in saying that, that's why the mythology by the Imam, I chose to play that, because there were people who were, in the early years, in the early days, used their brains, right, to extort and lead people, misuse people, using their tongue and so on. And those people didn't know better, so they felt that they needed to follow or needed to make ends meet to accommodate and assist what those people were saying, because they wanted to associate with them. And they felt that what they were saying was approved. So we had, as Africans, people in the diaspora, Africans, Americans, and African Caribbean, we were exploited in so many areas. But our Imam taught us to read, comprehend, understand, and to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger only. So may you all receive what we're trying to bring forth, and please investigate or make your own inquiries into Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, and you can read this in from the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, and it starts at the verse 183. Yes, 183. And it informs us as to our duty towards ourselves and towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fasting, the month of Ramadan. And it also expands very clearly about the Quran, that the Quran came as a light to mankind in this month, in the month of Ramadan. There's something else I wanted to read. We also have verses in the Quran, Surah 17, Ayah 76, Surah 3, Ayah 13. There's about 7 more, but these are just about fasting. The other generations before us who fasted. But here in Surah Al-Baqarah, what fasting is, how fasting is to be, how the month of fasting is meant to be approached, how we're meant to conduct ourselves, and within our communities, within our homes, and so forth. The full instructions, full understanding, the full layout, the full prescription is in Surah Al-Baqarah, which is Surah 2, Ayah, or chapter number 183. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you to receive our thoughts very clearly and our indications very clearly. So we're going to leave you because prayer time is coming, and preparation for that is also required. Is it ironic? Before we do go, I want to go back to my young brother, Abdullah. And before we go to Abdullah, I want to change the screen so we don't have no confusion. Yes, Abdullah.
Palestine's been occupied for decades, but a home for centuries. This land is generations of my family's memories. To plant, grow, and nurture the symbol of peace. The olive trees guaranteed that our people could eat. Living with limitations, pushed down by the occupation. Wanna see the pain? Take a look at the people's faces. Imagine being kicked out of the only house you ever known. We're praying for our souls while they're preying on our homes. It's not easy to put this into words. Looking at my baby sister, is this something she deserves? Growing up in a world where she's not treated the same, denied the right to live free because of where she came. They wanna occupy this land, won't let them occupy my mind. I stay occupied aside as I write about my life, because my only mission is to make people listen. This one's for Sheikh Jarrah, hoping it can make a difference. Cause the same thing happened in 48. My grandparents got evicted, I'm forced to move away to the refugee camp in Gaza. No, nothing has changed, they can never return. So that's where I am today, getting calls from cousins to see if I am alive. This year is not fireworks that are lighting the sky. We're trying to celebrate an Eid and keep the faith. I guess you could say it's how memories are made. Palestine.
Yes, our young brother from Palestine. You know, it's important to understand that I'm saying the world that we all know because we're here and we're living in it. True to this situation that's taking place, and we see how others are not dealing, and they're the same people who will look at other countries and insist on government changes, but they call the government, they say regime, to undermine and undervalue that country's institution called government. And they also judge other countries based on their standard of what they call human rights, equalities. So what we're seeing here in Palestine, what we're seeing that's happening, is a disregard for human rights, disregard for democracy, and just showing that their rules, however they consider them, are to be accepted as the right, and everyone else that they disapprove of is wrong. But what's with the dislike for humanity? The humanitarians that we once thought, when we listened to them in the United Nations, it is not there. The United Nations now, we see they're obsolete. One of the Bushes said this, that he will make it obsolete. He's not going to sit down and listen to them determine what he should do as the United States or not. And this is what happened with the Gulf War, Desert Storm 2. I mean, the first Bush had Desert Storm 1. And they're meant to be liberating a place or creating a place called Kuwait. But after a while, they see that the Iraqis rebuilt their country in a short space of time. All the areas that was bombed, bridges, buildings, roads, you name it. But it angered some people. And America controlled the oil wells in the region that they wanted to call Kuwait. But guess what happened after that? They convinced the very world and the same United Nations created all these words, axis of evil, and the fact that it would make the United Nations obsolete, and went ahead and projected multimedia visions and saying that this and this will happen in 40 hours, and Britain followed them, England followed them. And the world, as in American peoples and British people, some of the biggest ever demonstration ever known, but none of them were paying attention. And they obliterated that country. It hasn't showed one sign of recovery to date. And they went down to Afghanistan. And we don't know what Afghanistan actually looks like because they weren't revealing or showing any news to the world as a whole. The only big news we actually saw was when they were leaving. The Americans and others, their allies, were leaving. But how does Afghanistan looks? No, they told us that the Afghan did not like women. They oppressed women. They didn't like women learning and so on. And no one said, hey, this is the word Taliban means education. So what are you talking about? But the world wasn't meant to know that because that wasn't being printed and that wasn't being discussed on regular news. What is this conversation all about? I'm telling you, we're telling you, the earth as we know it and we're living in it right now, the world is a-changing. And there's nothing going to change that back. It's not like England says back to basic. All these big guys, they're going to be axed. By the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they'll be axed. Because the world can see. We can see how diabolical they are. I mean, it's Ramadan. I mean, there's so many trucks that's underground around Gaza with medical aid and other things for months, but were prohibited to deliver and exchange, empty their cargoes to the people who are in need. And now you have these gestures with people flying airplanes and dropping things. And so despicably, instead of dropping the things on the land, they're dropping the things on the seashores, where most of what they bought are falling into the sea. Now, good intention is good intention. And the same way this body can be dropping bombs, and the countries who are allegedly dropping food or dropping some parcels from the sky, they're sophisticated. They're the same people that is giving these people so much armory. And they want to let us, the citizens of this earth, believe that you cannot navigate. Are you mad? But yet still when the night comes, Britain and the US can bomb Yemen. And now you're shouting at Houthis. But you and Arabia, you've been bombing Yemen out of what? Why you all have been bombing Yemen for all these years? Yemen have a food crisis, have a medical crisis, have a health crisis for more than 6 years. Yemen is at the top of atrocities in the earth. Yemen. Now you're talking about Houthis and whatever. Name calling, name branding. Hamas is a government. It's an institution for Palestinian people. Now you want to tell the world that Hamas is a terrorist group. So what? So was the ANC. So was Nelson Mandela. So was Steve Biko. So was Walter Sulu. Yes, he's my champion. So was Winnie Mandela, the Queen of South Africa. So was so much people that you disapprove of. And you all says, that's in Jesus we trust, and God we put our faith, and Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You're all hypocrites. Serious thing, you're hypocrites. So that's why I'm persistently saying, explain to me who this Jesus is. I'm not like the other Muslims. Who is this? Because you changed the name. So who is this? You can't be calling me by another name and expect some reactions from me. You have to be touching me. Huh? Yes, you have to be touching me to get a reaction from me. Because if you don't know my name, you cannot get my attention. Or anybody's attention for that matter. Because you should be saying, yo, oi, hello, excuse me. But no, you came with a word called Jesus. So for me, myself personally, you need to explain who that is, because your characters are not the character of the person that we know, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell the world about, called Isa alayhi salam, Yeshua. No. That character is your character is not of that title. And this is the month of Ramadan. You're insisting that we should suffer. So I want to leave you with Surah Al-Rahman, which of the favors of our Lord, the world, can you deny?
بسم الله الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يسأله من في السماوات والأرض كل يوم هو في شأن فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان سنفرغ لكم أيها الثقلان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يرسل عليكما شواظ من نار ونحاس فلا تنتصران فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فإذا انشقت السماء فكانت وردة كالدهان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيومئذ لا يسأل عن ذنبه إنس ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يعرف المجرمون بسيماهم فيؤخذ بالنواصي والأقدام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان هذه جهنم اللهم نجنا برحمتك هذه جهنم التي يكذب بها المجرمون يطوفون بينها وبين حميم آن فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ولمن خاف مقام ربه جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ذواتا أفنان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان تجريان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما من كل فاكهة زوجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على فرش بطائنها من استبرق وجنى الجنتين دان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن قاصرات الطرف لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كأنهن الياقوت والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ومن دونهما جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مدهامتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان نضاختان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما فاكهة ونخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن خيرات حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان حور مقصورات في الخيام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على رفرف خضر وعبقري حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان تبارك اسم ربك ذي الجلال والإكرام.
So we're saying,
بسم الله
Assalamu alaikum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us our faults. May you receive our thoughts clearly. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you insight into what is right, what is proper for our lives, all of us, including yourselves. Please share, subscribe, have your comments, and investigate. Al-Islam. Assalamu alaikum.